Now, claims and counterclaims as Russia and Ukraine continue to blame each other of shelling rescuers and evacuees in the flood-hit Kherson region. 600 square kilometers of the Kherson region is underwater. And another area of focus here is Zaporizhzhia. That's the area of the critical nuclear power plant. Let me explain. There are three areas of focus in this region. The first being Snorivka, Kherson and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Snorivka, that's where Ukraine had placed landmines. The entire region is now flooded due to the dam explosion. Second, the crucial region of Kherson, as you can see on the map here, where Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of shelling each other amid evacuation efforts. And the third being the Zaporizhzhia, where Russia claims that it has pushed back a Ukrainian offensive. That's the claim. The NGO Hazardous Area Life Support Organization, it is helping clear landmines and other explosive devices. The Red Cross says mines uprooted and dispersed by flood waters that could pose a grave danger to civilians for decades to come in this area. Specialists from the organization say that they're unable to access minefields as roads leading up to them are completely flooded. Listen in.
Formed the front line of the conflict for a number of months, which means that the banks of the river themselves were quite heavily mined. So Halo's been working to remove those mines. However, since the explosion at the dam, we've seen the water levels in the Ingolets River rising significantly. During the first day, approximately 55 centimeters, and then they've continued rising since then. For the past 2 days, we have not been able to access any of those minefields, and we believe that the majority of them are completely underwater.
We now turn our attention to Kherson, where Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of shelling and hindering evacuation and rescue efforts from the flood-hit areas. Russian and Ukrainian forces, they are continuing the shelling and the blame game as well. According to Ukrainian officials, Russian shelling killed 1 person and injured 18 others. This includes one of the emergency service staff who was overseeing the evacuation. Meanwhile, officials from the Russian-controlled areas of Kherson said that 2 evacuees were killed in Ukrainian shelling. The devastating floods in the heart of the war-torn region of Kherson, that's resulted in the deaths of 5 people. As many as 41 people have been hospitalized in the region. Here's the footage of the shelling that's taking place even as Ukrainian forces attempt to evacuate citizens from Kherson. Take a look.
And the Russian oh, yes, here.
Сюда.
From Kherson, then we move to Zaporizhzhia. That's where the critical nuclear power plant is located. Although the reactors currently have been shut down, the plant still does need water to prevent a nuclear disaster. The plant's chief operator said that water levels at the reservoir had already gone below the critical point of 12.7 meters. Now, the IAEA says that the nuclear plant continues to receive water from the reservoir even after the dam was damaged. Russia said its forces had fought a 2-hour battle with Ukrainian troops on Thursday. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the Ukrainian offensive, it involved 1,500 soldiers and 150 armored vehicles. You can see these vehicles and these visuals that show 2 groups of tanks shelling each other here. This is a drone footage that has been released by the Russian Defense Ministry. Here's what the commander of the Russian army in Zaporizhzhia had to say.
At 0200 hours, the enemy launched an offensive. The enemy was exposed early on by the military intelligence of the Air Reconnaissance Special Forces, who inflicted a smoldering defeat against them. Having suffered losses, the enemy abandoned any further offensive action and retreated with their remaining forces.
Now, to understand the situation on ground better, we have with us Vadim Turkan, a former diplomat from Kyiv. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
This is my pleasure. It's nice to be at your broadcast again.
Thank you so much, sir. My first question to you, what is your assessment of the situation in the Kherson region? How do you assess the damage from the dam breach?
The situation is very clear. Russia has done a terrorist attack unprecedented after World War II. And now it is too early to evaluate all the losses which Ukraine have, but our experts say that at least 400,000 tons of yield or harvest is lost. At least 50, 70 our villages and towns are underwater, and at least 5 years we need to rebuild this power plant, this dam. So now Ukraine is trying to deal with this situation. European countries, now about 10 of them, has provided humanitarian assistance necessary to tackle this challenge. But Russians are trying to accuse Ukraine in this terrorist attack which they have committed, and they are trying to attack civilians who are rescuing those people in need. So the situation is awful. The situation is very unprecedented, and this war crime which should be investigated by International Court of Criminal Justice.
Right. So now that being said, the flooding, of course, as I mentioned earlier, poses another risk as well. Those of the landmines that landmines have been displaced that can impact the region for decades to come. So how do you see this impacting the war going forward?
Of course, there will be many years in need to tackle this challenge, and of course Ukraine will be suffering sort of losses in terms of export of its graves, agriculture products. I think that impact will be felt by many countries. It's about 14% of agriculture products which Ukraine produce, which will be now be lost. So of course this is not just Ukrainian pain. This is disaster for many countries, for the region as a whole.
Right, sir. Also another area of focus here being Zaporizhzhia. That's where Russia claims that it has pushed back a Ukrainian offensive. How equipped do you think Ukraine is at this point to counter Russian attacks?
You know, if anyone would believe those fairy tales which representatives of Ministry of Defense or attack, rather I would say, of Russia, then it would be really very strange situation. More than 10 European armies was damaged or destroyed by Russian forces. But this is not, in fact, the truth. Ukraine didn't start offensive as such. We still are in the phase of preparation of the offensive. Only everything what our army is doing, Russia is trying to find those part of the front line which are most suitable for offensive. So I do not believe that so-called Minister of Defense of Russia, Shoigu, at least 1% of what he said can be verified. Last example, 2 days ago, when he or someone from his ministry said that we have damaged 10 Leopards, German tanks, it appeared after checking of the situation that they have destroyed Ukrainian agricultural John Deere combines and tractors, you know. So don't believe Russian propaganda. Try to verify the facts, try to check everything what they are pretending to say.
Right, sir. Of course, these are based off of reports that are coming out of the region. Amid efforts to evacuate citizens from flood-hit areas, again, as per reports, Russian and Ukrainian forces are continuing shelling. They've, of course, accused each other of hindering rescue efforts. So what's your take on the situation on ground at the moment?
Listen, to say Russian and Ukrainian sides accusing each other, this is not the right thing to say. Russians here to destroy Ukrainian country. Russians here to kill Ukrainian civilians. Ukraine is here because this is our territory, and we are not fighting with civilians. When we have got this huge disaster, we are trying to rescue as many people as it is possible. And our rescue teams under attack of Russian terrorist military forces, and whom we are supposed to attack. Our civilians from another side who are under occupation of Russia. No, this is not true. To rightly say is Russian, even despite the fact that there is a huge disaster caused by the terrorist act, are shelling Ukrainian rescue teams, are preventing the possibility to rescue Ukrainian civilians. What is going on the ground? And this is awful situation. They are not just committed barbarian terrorist attack. They are trying to kill more civilians. This is nature of Russian state, current Russian state, and this is nature of these people, of Russians. This is phenomenon of racism. We knew what was Nazism and fascism is about, but now we knew another phenomenon, racism. Many countries in Europe recognize this phenomenon as absolutely awful thing which has to be tackled.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, these are based off of reports, and thank you very much for bringing in your perspective on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.